you asked me if I would do this, I thought, well, I've got to look and see if I've got my old sea chest. So this is a lot of history in this little box. And then I have my envelope that says William R. Ramsey, Z Papers, Burnt Rope. And that reminds me of the story we're about to tell. I thought, since we had a nautical theme, I would get my captain's hat out, even though back then I had no business wearing a hat like this, because I was just an ordinary seaman. This I got when we were at Edisto, and I had a boat that I could pretend to be captain of. Summer of 1951, I was 19 years old, and we were in college, my two brothers and I, John and Dick, finishing up a year. I was finishing my junior year in college, and we needed, of course, to find a job for the summer to earn some money for our next year's expenses. My dad, being connected with the various labor unions, knew some people in the National Maritime Union, which is a union of sailors. Mm-hmm. And they were short of men that summer because it was the Korean War, and a lot of young men had been drafted into the Army. And so the Merchant Marine, which is what they call the crews on the merchant ships, were short of people, and they were giving temporary papers to college students to go ship out and help man the ships. So John and Dick and I decided that was a good thing to do. So we went to Charleston, South Carolina, and we got our Z papers. And here's my Z paper. You can see I was a lot younger then. You had to have the Z papers in order to get a job on the merchant ship. And they gave you shots, you know, against diseases. So anyway, the way they put you on a ship, or did that back then, I guess they still do, is the unions do it. The unions maintain a list of available sailors, people with papers, and then when the ship comes in and they say we need so many men for this crew, then they assign the people to that ship, and you get on that ship and you sail off. Well, John got on a steamer, on an oil tanker first, and then Dick got on a steamer, cargo ship that went across the ocean all the way to Rotterdam, and I had to wait because there was some kind of a union strike or something going on. But finally I was assigned to a ship with a Pan American line, the oil tanker. And I had to get on the ship in Savannah, Georgia. So I took a bus down to Savannah, Georgia, and I got on, went out, found the pier, got on the ship, and reported to they call him the purser, who is the sort of the secretary treasurer of the ship. He signed people on and things. And he got my papers all signed, got me on the ship, and said, now you need to find report to the first mate. Well, I didn't know the first mate, the second mate, the third mate, or whatever. But I asked some of the men where the first mate was, and they pointed to a gentleman who was standing on a bridge. And I went up there and I told him who I was, and I was reporting for duty. And he was a big, gruff old man. He wasn't pleasant at all. He said, well, all right. He said, every morning I want you to swab the deck and clean the head and suture the bulkheads. Well, I figured out from my readings what the head was, clean the bathroom, and swab the deck obviously meant mop the floors, the passageways. Yeah. Bulkhead I knew was the walls in a ship. They called them bulkheads. But suji, I didn't know what suji meant. He said, don't you know what that means? I said, no, sir. He said, well, find out. So that was my introduction to the ship. Pleasant place. And I found out that suji was a kind of soap they use to wash down the grease and debris that collects on the bulkheads. And it's a very strong soap. You eat your hands up, you know, lye soap that you have to clean the bulkheads and keep the ship clean. They do keep ships very clean. Well, the ship was in dry dock. Dry dock means that the ship had gone into a big little pier that had a lift in it and lifted it out of the water so they could scrape off barnacles and things and repaint the sides. And meanwhile, those of us on the inside of the ship were to clean the inside of the ship. So we did a lot of shipping and painting and moving cargo and things like that. All in dry dock, not in the water at all. Well, I got seasick, even though we weren't in the water. I think because of the change of diet, change of water and so forth, but anyway. But I survived it and we managed to get along, and finally we were ready to start sailing down from Savannah to Texas City, Texas, which means going down around the Florida Keys in the Atlantic Ocean, and then going around, crossing the Gulf of Mexico to Texas, and then we would fill up with gasoline and kerosene in our ships and take it back up the East Coast. A tanker is a long ship with a whole bunch of what they call hatches in it. Hatches to be a big hole, a covered hole, and it goes down into the bowels of the ship. And the ship is essentially all tanks. It's just sections of the ship that's divided by bulkheads into chambers, and those chambers are what they use to fill with whatever grade gasoline or kerosene or oil they're putting into the ship. Well, they were empty, although there were fumes in them. They were pretty nasty. You climb down the hatch down into the bottom of the ship, and then along the side walls there were ledges where the ribs of the ship. You climb up and you scrape off the rust that had accumulated until it got down to the bottom, and you had to scrape up the rust and put it in buckets, and they haul it up to the hatch and throw it over the side of the ship. Well, I didn't have gloves, I didn't have nose mask or anything, or eyeglasses, and it was before the days of government regulation on those things. So my hands got pretty chewed up from scraping off that rust, and by the time we got to the bottom, scraping the rust down, it was so thick, breathing it, that you spit rust when you, it was really gross. And later on I got a little hepatitis from that and had to take some time off, but anyway. It was hard work, but it paid well, and the food was great. The men complained, but it was great food compared to what college food had been. And we had lots of it. You had a choice of what you want, usually 3 different kinds of meat, you know, chicken or meatloaf or something else. What you didn't eat, they threw over the side. The fish enjoyed it. So I ate well, and of course there was no charge for lodging. You stayed on the ship, no charge for room. So all that I could earn was, used for college. It was great. Well, the men on the ship there were about 30 men on the ship to manage it. The captain was the head of the ship, and you rarely saw him. Then it was the first mate, second mate, and third mate. The third mate is one that did most of the work. And then a bosun sort of a working supervisor. And then you had able-bodied seamen, and you had ordinary seamen, which I was the most ordinary. And then in the engine room you had wipers, and you had engineers, and then in the galley you had the steward and the cooks and the people that fed the others. So it was all well organized, but not too many men on the ship. And it was hot. You get out in the middle of the ocean, and sundown, and no trees, no shade. You got hot, so you walked around mostly in shorts. One of the duties of an ordinary seaman is to stand watch at night. The ship is moving through waters, and of course it gets dark, and they have people in the gatehouse, which is up on a bridge up above in the midships, so they can look out. But they want somebody right up to the front of the ship looking ahead to see if they see anything that they might collide, another ship they might collide with. So you're watching for lights of other ships at night, training your eyes to see if ahead. It's very, very tough because sometimes the white caps on the waves look like a light for a minute. And you think it's a light, but it's not, it's just a white cap. And if you saw something ahead, you were to ring a bell. And if it was one single ring, if it was to the left, 2 rings if it was to the right, that's the port side, the starboard side, or if it's straight ahead you rang ding, ding, ding. So I was determined I was going to be the first one to see anything, you know. So I strained my eyes. And one of my first nights on watch, we passed Miami Beach. And of course, there were ships all over the place. I was ringing that bell. They finally sent somebody out. They don't bother. We know where we are. But I was determined to be the first to see. Anyway, when we got away from shore and out into the ocean, then I was careful. And one night I saw a light that I was sure was a light, not just a white cap. And I watched it for a while, and sure enough, it was twinkling ahead. So I rang the bell 3 times, and they rang back, means they saw it too.
Mm.
About that time, the clouds parted, and it was the moon.
Oh.
A very still sliver of a moon, just the tip was showing, and I thought it was a light. But apparently they did too. They never said anything more about it. But it was lonely out there on that for my 2-hour stand in the front of the ship, and if the weather was bad, sometimes it got pretty cold. The wind would blow, and if you had rain across, and the rain was hard, and the clouds would be all swirling around. The ocean's an amazing thing. You can see forever, it seems like. You stand there and look out, and what's the horizon level? 6 miles? But I think 6 miles you begin to see the ocean, the curvature of the earth. But you can see it all around you, and this undulating waves. The ocean on a good day is usually a kind of a pale powder blue-green. And we see flying fish, and
Oh wow.
see all kinds of things. And once I saw a water spout, which is a tornado at sea.
Oh yeah. I've
It
always wanted to
was a
see
long
that.
distance away, but you see this column of water just going straight up like a column going out.
Wow.
And if it was lightning at night, it would come down, and it was like an umbrella of lightning. It would go all around you, sort of went out on all sides. It's just an amazing display of God's nature, and the stars, of course, when there were no clouds. It was just beautiful. If it was rough weather, you could get a little sick in your stomach, but and I got used to that though. So I did a lot of singing of hymns and praying when it got bad weather, but I did fine out there. The men on the ship were a pretty superstitious lot. Men from England, they called Limeys. Men from Poland, they called Polacks. Men from Greece and from other countries, and Chinese, all kinds, black, white. I had one black roommate, bunkmate once. He was a great big fella, strong as an ox, but one of the smartest guys I've ever met. He knew philosophy, he knew astronomy. He couldn't understand why people were prejudiced against blacks, because he was black and he knew he was superior intellectually and physically to most people. But he thought women were inferior to men.
Oh no.
And they were put on earth for men's pleasure, and he had a girl at every port. So it was strange to meet people like that and talk with them and so forth. But we had one guy who came on from the south. He'd never been on a ship before either, and he said to me one day, he said, you think we'll see any of them there seagirls? I said, you mean seagulls? He said, no, them she-fish. I said, you mean mermaids? Yeah.
Oh wow.
I said, no, I don't think we'll see any mermaids. But they were full of all kinds of stories that they had of ships and things in the sea. I know I found a piece of wood one time, and I made a rod out of it and carved notches in the rod, and I found a nail and put a little propeller on the front of it. You know what a wimmy diddle is? A little knot stick that you can rub a pencil across, and it'll make the propeller turn. And if you put your thumb on one side, the propeller turns one way. If you put your finger on the other side, it'll turn the other way. So I made that, and I took it to these men. I said, look, I can make the propeller turn. Wow! I'll make it go the other way. Wow, they thought I was magic, you know. But they would tell stories of ships and things that had happened in their adventures. One of the stories was about an oil tanker that had been struck by lightning and caught fire. But it never sank. It just continually burned. And the crew all turned into skeletons. The fiery ship with the skeleton crew. And according to their stories, it would, on stormy nights, it would hunt down other tankers and try to set them on fire. Well, you know, I thought, nonsense, this is all part of this mythology that goes along with ships. And one night I was standing watch, and we were plowing across the Gulf of Mexico, and it was a stormy night. And the clouds were gradually closing in closer and closer. Finally, the clouds came together. It was just pitch black, and wild storms. And I saw a light ahead, a flickering light. And I was sure I'd seen it. And I checked to make sure, and yeah, I rang it up, and they answered back, said, yeah, they saw it too. And as we got closer to it, it looked like the ship was on fire. And so we went charging ahead to see if we could be of some help.
Mm-hmm.
And our tanks were empty because we were on our way down to pick up gasoline. We still had lots of oil on the ship in order to drive the turbines that ran the ship. But we were plowing through the seas at pretty good speed. And as we got closer, we realized it was in fact a ship that was on fire. And as we got closer, we realized it was not burning up. It was the fiery ship. And as we got close enough, we could start to see figures on it running around in the flames. And so we knew it was the fiery ship. Well, the captain, of course, immediately gave orders to turn the ship around.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a while to turn the ship around. The ship doesn't have brakes on it.
Right.
And so we made a big circle. And by the time we got turned around, the other ship was getting pretty close. And you could see these skeletons shaking their bony fists at us
Oh my
and
gosh.
coming after us. So we didn't know what to do, but we all got ordered to go to the back of the ship with axes and shovels and get rid of any fire that was trying to get on the ship and try to avoid them boarding our ship. They had big long ropes with grappling hooks on the end. The grappling hook is a three-pronged anchor-like thing that you throw over a railing or something and you can catch hold of something and pull it up. So, and every time that fiery ship went down into the waves, steam would come up. And so it was all misty and hazy and red, and we were going pretty fast, but they were gaining on us. Slowly were gaining on us, and we were sweating and wondering what was going to happen. And then they started to throw things at us. It was sort of like cotton balls that were on fire with oil. And they'd land on the ship, and you couldn't just muff them out.
Right.
And water didn't help them much, it just sort of spread it. So we had to take shovels and shovel them over the side, get rid of them. This went on for hours, and they finally got close enough that they threw their grappling hooks, and some of them caught on our rail, and they started to pull closer to our ship. And we would take our axes and chop those ropes so that they would go back and sizzle in the water as they went back to their ship and steam up. And this went on for hours, back and forth, and they got closer and closer and closer. And finally they were close enough that they were just about ready to, they could leap across and board us. And we were worn out. But I don't know if you've ever seen a sunrise at sea, but when the sun comes up over the ocean, as it peeks over the horizon, it spreads its light over the ocean surface, and it glows like it's molten gold. Well, that's what happened. The storm stopped, the sun came up, and everything turned orange, and that ship just disappeared in it. And we, of course, were relieved and thrilled that we'd survived the night. But it seemed like a dream, and sometimes you think maybe it was. But I kept a piece of rope that we chopped off one of those grappling hooks. And so I have a piece of burnt rope that reminds me of that night when we fought off the fiery ship with the skeleton crew. So that's the story of my summer on the sea and my fiery ship and skeleton crew. When you asked me if I would do this, I thought, well, I've got to look and see if I've got my old sea chest with my stuff in it. So I went and got my sea chest and opened it up. And I've got my big shark's tooth in there,
Oh wow.
which puts me in an ocean frame of mind. But I also had this packet, which is some cement slabs from the Berlin Wall that was torn down between East and West Germany. One of our foreign students stayed with us, and she came from East Germany. She'd escaped, and she bought some pieces of the wall and left with us. So this is his lot of history in this little box.